This case serves as another example of how easy it is for the claim of acute occupation to override the rights of a third party when they couldn't have been expected under the circumstances. Let us lay acute occupation out as an example of our own. Kyle has purchased legal title of the registered land, Woodbury Farm, from Tim, and has gone through all of the formal implications. As Kyle was ready to move into the land, he discovers that Meredith is currently living in the main building attached to the land he purchased. Meredith, having contributed to the price of the original purchase of the property, has a legal interest and was not made aware that Tim had sold the land to Kyle despite Tim being registered as the sole proprietor. Therefore, Meredith is claiming that she is an actual occupation. Does Kyle have the right to negate Meredith's interests, or is he bound by them? It is clear that Meredith has a proprietary interest as she had contributed to the purchase price, and she is an actual occupation at the time of Kyle moving in. So by law, Meredith's interests override Kyle's, with or without his being on the register. For her interest to override, Meredith's presence must have been obvious upon reasonable inspection of the property, and if approached by Kyle prior to the purchase, she would have been inspected on reasonable grounds of informing him of her interest in the land. Let's say, for example, Meredith had hidden her belongings during the property viewings and did not inform Kyle of her interests. Then Kyle's interests would instead override Meredith's, and she would be expected to leave. So what must Kyle do to protect his interests? Well, despite how unorthodox overriding interests appear to be, there are ways around them which are as so. Kyle can either attempt to pay off Meredith's interests, attempting to come to an agreement with her, or Kyle can overreach Meredith's interests by paying the purchase monies to two trustees. Overreaching is where a beneficiary under a trust has their rights detached from the land itself and attached to the proceeds of the sale. It was designed with efficiency in mind, but lacks the consideration for protecting those with an interest in land, as it can effectively override the overriding interest if done correctly. Under Section 2, subsection 1 of the Law of Property Act 1925, it clearly states that a conveyance to a purchaser of a legal estate and land shall overreach any equitable interest or power affecting that estate, whether or not he has notice thereof, meaning the person with the equitable interest doesn't even have to be informed of their interest being overridden by overreaching. Overreaching only works for equitable interests, meaning legal interests are not affected by it, according to Section 2, subsection 3. It also excludes certain equitable interests, depending on the circumstances. For overreaching to work, there must be a trust in land, an interest under the trust that has the capability of being overreached, and it must be in compliance with regard to statutory requirements in relation to the payment of capital money. As stated, it requires there to be payment to at least two trustees to effectively remove equitable interest from the land and attach it to the proceeds of the sale. This was laid out under Section 27, subsection 2 of the Law of Property Act 1925, and was designed to allow more protection for the beneficiary and prevent fraud from occurring. It was also addressed in the leading case of City of London Building Society and Flegg, 1988. It was held that the Flegg's interest in the property was overreached because they had paid the capital monies to two trustees, so when their daughter and son-in-law chose to mortgage the house to City of London Building Society and fall behind on their mortgage, the Fleggs were required to relieve despite contributing to at least half of the purchase. This shows yet another failure in the legal system and how it would be beneficial to innocent equitable beneficiaries if the system was reformed to allow them more protection in situations such as this case. Let us now look at one last paragraph, which is paragraph 3 of Schedule 3, Easements and Profits of Pronderies. An easement is a right over a land that is enjoyed by someone called a dominant tenant, but owned by the servient tenant. It could refer to rights such as access to a path across someone's land or the right to maintain a piece of land and protect it from being built upon, the first being a positive easement and the second being a negative easement. A profit of prondere relates to easements as the right to take, meaning the person with an easement over a piece of land has the right to take resources, whether it be fish, wood, or stone. The requirements for easements to override registered dispositions is that it is obvious on a reasonably careful inspection of the land. It is known to the person of whom the disposition is made. It is exercised within a year before the disposition was made, and, if it is a profit, it is registered under Schedule 3, Paragraph 3 of the Commons Registration Act 1965. Previously, for an easement that is equitable to override an interest, it must be openly exercised and enjoyed, but now is no longer the case under the Land Registration Act 2002, as only legal easements and profits can override interests, and only for land that is already registered. With that being said, we have looked at the overriding interest of Schedule 3 and how it addresses several issues regarding protection of interest, and how it does not follow the beliefs of the mirror principle. Many have suggested possible solutions, such as the abolishment of overriding interests, as it is unreasonable and unfair to future purchasers.
Created using Powtoon.